recently, but most of you we haven't seen for quite some time. So it's good to see your faces. I'm anxious to catch up and see where everybody's lives have taken them on this last couple of months. I think most educators are done with, or most classroom teachers are done teaching classes. Is that correct? You can shake your heads. I have you in gallery view so I can kind of see. Yeah. Yes. Sarah's clapping. Sara Slack, are you done with your online group? No. Oh, you might be the one of the few that still has to have it. So I know that that's been challenging for many of you. I've heard about that. I know it was challenging in my family as well. And I'm sure if you're a researcher that has kids in school, you also enjoyed that last couple of months. So, or even if they're in college, like Judy's family, they all had to come home. So hopefully today will be a positive spin on our crazy lives, and we get to kind of reflect back on what, like 2019, if we thought 2019 was a bad year, it probably looks much shinier and better than this year. So this will be a nice step back in time and see what everybody did, and how the first part of 2019, when you started bringing this back into your this experience back into your lives, and you were some of you for Antarctica were just getting to go to Antarctica. So yeah, it'll be just kind of fun to check in and see where you are with this experience. And that's really the whole purpose of our webinar, is to kind of catch up, reflect on where this journey is taking you, where you think it's going to take you, and see how ARCIS can best support you and your researchers. So with that, before I go to a PowerPoint and share some slides, it would be great to do a Remember Me. And because for some of us, it has been a really long time since we connected with you. And have you introduce yourself, your name, your organization, and the expedition you were affiliated with. So I'm just to do this in a gallery view, round robin, not by expedition date or time or anything like that. So the first one on my list is Elaine Hood.
Hi, I work for the U.S. Antarctic Program, and I help the Antarctic teachers get through the dreadful physical qualification process and make sure they know what to pack and how to pack and get them down there. And sometimes I can assist them while they're on the ice, but a lot of times their PIs have that all covered. So I'm just there as a liaison between the onerous bureaucracy and getting to the ice. That's it.
All right, welcome, Bridget.
Hey, I'm Bridget, and I was investigating thermoregulation of Weddell seals with Heather Wanig.
All right, excellent. Denise. Oh, you're muted, Denise.
Sorry about that. I'm Denise Tardo. I was with Dr. Todjum, and we were looking at how the fish were adapting or not adapting to changes in their environment. And I was with San Antonio Elementary.
Okay. Allie? Allie. There you go.
So I'm Allie, and I teach 7th grade science in South Texas. And I was out with Jeremy May and Steve Oberbauer in Barrow and Tulik, and we were looking at vegetation, and Slow-Mo was there too. Slow-Mo's on my shelf. He's right there. And yeah, that's the expedition I was on.
Great. And next I have Regina.
Hi, I'm Regina Brinker. I was a support teacher at the training this last year, and worked at a project with Rose Corey at the Tulik Field Station.
All right, thank you. Piper.
Hi, I'm Piper Bartlett. I'm a high school science teacher, and I was working with Dr. Lee Cooper on the Distributed Biological Observatory, looking at biodiversity and biomass of benthic organisms in the Bering and Chukchi Sea.
Great. David?
Hi there, Dave Walker. I teach in Austin, Texas, high school science. I was up at Tulip Field Station this past summer with Rose Corey and her team, looking at how sunlight breaks down dissolved organics in Arctic streams into carbon dioxide.
Very good. Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Lewanig from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I was down in the Antarctica looking at physiological development of Weddell seals, thermoregulation, and diving.
All right, welcome. Jocelyn?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn. I'm an informal educator from California with the show Jargy the Science Girl, and I went to the South Pole to visit the Ice Cube Lab and learn all about neutrinos.
Thank you. Jennifer? Yeah, Jen. Ball. Jen.
Oh, hi. So I was actually a support teacher, and I worked with Denise a little bit, and I'm really glad that she got to go to Antarctica.
Yes, for sure. Graham.
Hi, everyone. My name is Graham Lober. I'm a graduate student with Amy Moran, and I was in Antarctica last season studying the thermal tolerances of Antarctic invertebrates with Amy Osbourne. Hi, Amy.
Fun to have you here. Good, thanks, Graham. Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Gold. I'm at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I was on the Mosaic Expedition and worked with Katie Gavenas.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And then Anne, we have it.
Hi, I'm Ann Todgham. I'm at UC Davis, and we were down with Denise this past fall in McMurdo studying developmental physiology of fishes, and it was super exciting for us because we actually had 3 PolarTREC teachers, so I also want to say hi to Bridget and to Amy O.
Yeah, it sounds like Amy O is having some technical issues here, so hopefully she can rejoin us, but I'm sure she'd say hi back. So we have, let's see, where am I at? Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy May, and I'm at Florida International University. I work at Tulip Field Station, Barrow, and Akasuk, and we were with Ale last year working on vegetation.
All right, great. Rose.
Hi, I'm Rose Corey. I'm a professor in Earth and Environmental Sciences at University of Michigan and work mainly at Tulip Field Station in the Arctic. And yeah, fortunate, lucky to work with Regina Brinker in the past and then David Walker last year.
Good, welcome. Hi, Lee, your turn.
Yeah, Lee Cooper, University of Maryland, and I worked with Piper last year on the Healy and the Bering and the Chukchi Seas.
All right, welcome. Amy M. Moran.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm at the University of Hawaii, and I was down at McMurdo with several of the rest of you last season, and we were looking at the effects of warming oceans on baby invertebrates.
All right, and I think we're moving to Frank. Your turn.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank. I'm a researcher at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory here, and I was with Sara this spring on the NV Palmer in the Amundsen Sea, studying the Thwaites Glacier oceanography, bottom bathymetry, sediment coring.
All right, thank you. Jen Danielson.
Hi, my name is Jen Danielson. I'm the program evaluator for PolarTREC, and thanks for so many quick responses on my teacher surveys.
We like data. Sarah Crowley, that is.
Hello, I'm Sarah. Many of you know me just as helping out with anything I can with PolarTREC.
Sara Slack.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sara. I went on the Thwaites Offshore Research project with Frank Nietzsche. We were studying the shape of the seafloor and the sediments of the seafloor in front of the Thwaites Glacier.
All right. And Katie Gavinas. Katie Gavinas, that is, not Katie Sherry. There's a lot of duplicates on this call.
I'm Katie Gavinas. I work for the Center for Alaskan Coastal Studies, and I was out with the Mosaic Expedition in September and October with Anna Gold. And it was a really incredible experience in the Central Arctic Ocean.
Awesome. And Steve Oberbauer, you look like you're in the clouds there, Steve.
I'm in the fog. This is Steve Oberbauer. I'm at Florida International University in Miami. I'm a professor and chair of the department still. 2 more months and I'm done. And then I'll be a human again. I worked with Jeremy May and Ali Martinez, Adut Geogvik, Akasuk, and Tulik. We are the Aeon ITEX project, monitoring changes in phenology and vegetation with climate warming.
Awesome, welcome. And now we're to Katie Sherry.
Hi, I'm Katie Sherry. I was 2010 PolarTREC teacher to the Ice Cube Neutrino Telescope in the South Pole. And this year I was a supporter of Jocelyn Argueta. She went down to the Ice Cube Neutrino Telescope in the South Pole.
Awesome, welcome. Svea.
Hi, I'm Svea Anderson. I was a 2018 Polar Trekker. I was a support teacher this year for Kate. Worked with Doni and Tulik, and my 1-year memory came up today that today is the day I met a grizzly bear in the field. So, yay, that was a good memory. I survived.
Yes, that's quite the memory too. Monica. Monica.
Hello, everybody. I'm Monica Nunez, and I was up in northern Alaska in Utqiagvik with Dr. Craig Tweedy doing Arctic research using LiDAR and drones and spectrophotometry, so very exciting.
Yeah, and I believe Craig's going to join sometime today too. So, Amy O.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Osbourne. I'm an outdoor educator in the Sausalito area near San Francisco, although we're furloughed. So I'm in the car on the last leg of going to Ohio to my dad's house. So I went to Antarctica with Dr. Amy Moran and got to study sea spiders and nudibranchs, sea slugs, and marine ectotherms, and how the warming ocean might impact their growth and development. Yeah, I'm at McMurdo Station.
All right, so drive safely there, Amy O. And we don't want to see anything happen on our video cams today. But welcome. We have Kate on the phone. So go ahead, Kate.
Hi guys. So I went to the Tulik Field Station last summer with Doni to study shrub and vegetation distribution, and I teach 10th grade chemistry at Inglewood, California.
Right. And welcome. And then we have Doni by Doni, somewhere's Doni. Go ahead, Doni.
Hi, my name's Doni Bretthart. I'm a faculty member at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I work at the Tulik Field Station on the project that I worked with Kate and Svea on, is relating to how shrubs affect the carbon and nitrogen cycling of near surface soil organic matter and how that affects the growth of the plants in turn. And it was awesome. I remember that day with the bear really clearly, Svea. That was amazing. And Kate, so nice to hear you again.
All right, I think I got everybody. If I didn't, Judy, of course, is up there and I'm over here, so you know us. So I'm gonna get started by sharing my screen here. And for Kate, who's joined by phone, you know, we'll just try to walk you through what we're seeing. I don't know if you got a PDF or anything, but let's get started here with sharing the screen. So basically, I wanted to, again, just welcome all of you to this webinar to reflect on your experience. This particular award was called STEM at the Polls, so that's why we have it officially with our NSF award is STEM at the Polls. So today we're going to, I'm going to share just a few things on updating where we are with the program and where you can find products. And then we're going to turn this over to reflections on the experience, both from the educators and researchers side, and then talk a little bit about staying connected. And then if anybody has anything else they need to share, we'll have some time for that as well. You did just go round robin, but this was just to mostly give you an idea of, this is a flyer of the 2019-2020 cohort and where you all went or didn't go at one time. Let's see, Bridget finally got to go to Antarctica. I'm sure we'll hear about her story because that took actually several years to get there. And Jocelyn, I want to point out that you weren't on this flyer in this particular iteration, but you're there on the Antarctica. So. A little background about how many educators we've supported over the years. At the end of this particular group, we've had up to 186. There's currently a 2021 cohort, which does add to these numbers. As you all might know by now, they were unable to deploy to the Arctic and the Antarctic. So this newer cohort has actually been postponed a year in their deployments, which will make my reporting more fun because I will totally forget all that and what happened. So today, when you hear from everybody, they'll be talking about various, especially the educators, they'll be talking about various things that they've been working on and how they've been sharing their experience with you. A lot of the things that they're sharing have been captured in some of our program requirements, and those are put onto the PolarTREC website. And there's a number of ways that you can access that information. One of the products you should have all seen for most of your educators by now, there's still a few people that are working on some of them depending on when they deployed, is the STEM experience report. And this is a report that all of the research teams, at least the PI, should have vetted and reviewed, and then Judy posted it on the website underneath everybody's expedition. But it's also, there's a special section under resources which has STEM education or STEM experience reports. But these reports are kind of capture the, hopefully the essence of the expedition, what kind of science was being investigated, and then it has a series of questions and things when they're creating their reports for them educators to reflect back on their experience, why it's important for educators to go to the field. And these reports in particular get sent to NSF, our program officer there, and to the research team. The other place to find products as lessons have been developed, or if there were presentations that were presented at conferences and things, those get added to learning or articles. Those get added to our learning resource database, and they also have a separate view that you can sort through and look for particular, lessons that relate to whatever your subject you're interested or grade level. But they also get aggregated under each expedition page. So every researcher, if you're looking for what your educator did for that particular year in that particular expedition, you just need to go to your main expedition page, and at the bottom you'll see the latest journals, you'll see any of these products that I'm referring to. And if you have questions about that, let me know. The other thing is that we, on the back side, we meaning Judy, Ronnie, who works on the web, and myself, and Joed, who does videos and photography, we collect data about web page views, number of comments, some Google Analytics about the general website and things like that. And then I also ping everybody for all the educators for any social media analytics. And so if you have questions about those kinds of data as a researcher or even as an educator and you want to report on something, just ask Judy and myself about it and we'll see what we can dig up for you. But I use those in my reports to NSF as well. What we asked everybody to, all the educators to report on today was kind of to reflect on their experience and put together a slide. And if they didn't have a slide, then hopefully you guys are prepared to at least share your experience. But we want to know what was some of the highlights of your experience, give us some updates on your outreach, and also talk a little bit about your future plans to collaborate. So Judy put these all in order, but I actually don't. I think they're in expedition order. Is that right, Judy? Okay. So assuming I know the expedition order, I think the first one up is David. And can you just share a little bit about your slide, some of the outreach and highlights that you've done since you've been back?
Yeah, sure. So just to give you kind of an idea of, this is the team we were working with next to the dry lab at Toolik Field Station. We were working in the Arctic. And the goal of this project was to assess, is Dr. Rose Corey, Dr. George Kling, and Dr. Byron Crump. They have a team up there, and they're all sort of different parts of this work, looking at how dissolved organic material is broken down in Arctic streams into carbon dioxide. And Rose Corey's specific focus involved sunlight. And so one of the main things that I wanted to do was create a lesson for my students, an activity, a lab for my students that involved sunlight somehow. And Jason Dobkowski, who's a lab tech for George Kling up there, had done some experiments previously at Toolik Field Station where he exposed different, he exposed like Coke and tea and different things that have, organic material in them that has color to sunlight, and they were actually able to detect photo bleaching in those samples. And so I thought that that could be a really cool sort of analogy for students to visualize how what's going on is that sunlight is hitting organic molecules in these waters and eventually converting them to carbon dioxide. And that in that process, what happens is photo bleaching, so the streams actually lose their color. And Rose Corey had a really cool analogy that she would use quite a bit when she would talk about this, especially to more general audiences, is that she would actually use tea, and she would describe different Arctic streams as being like different types of tea. They all have different colors and different shades and things like that. And so I did some experiments for this where I was kind of looking at how both sunlight and artificial light would serve to photo bleach different materials. And on the top, you can see this was done in a closet at my house where I basically had an artificial grow bulb. And I ended up purchasing a time-lapse camera after I used Dr. Crump's, which was super amazing. And I was able to take a time-lapse of the photo bleaching of this Coke sample over what eventually ended up being 190 hours before my cat got his paw underneath and yanked the sample out from the closet. But it was a pretty cool proof of concept. And so I ended up creating this lab where students would brew concentrated solutions of tea and expose them to sunlight and to artificial light, and then use spectrophotometry to detect the wavelength of maximum absorbance, create a concentration curve using Beer's law, and then they would be able to detect the degree of photo bleaching in sunlight exposed and artificial light exposed samples as compared to dark control samples. So that was kind of the connection with the sunlight. And then on the right, so those are photos on the left-hand side, and sunlight is super important in the Arctic, obviously, because during the summer it's up year round. During the summer it's up year round. During the summer it's up 24 hours a day. And then on the right-hand side, I teach organic chemistry, and so it was so great to work with Dr. Corey, because she really works with, she's sort of an Arctic organic chemist, so to speak, an aquatic geochemist. And so one of the ways that they analyze stream samples is by using high-resolution mass spectrometry. And Van Crevelen diagrams are really cool graphical outputs of high-res mass spec, because they basically put hydrogen to carbon ratio on the y-axis, oxygen to carbon ratio on the x-axis, and you're able to really get a nice graphical interpretation of the different components of a stream sample. And so I had students walk through this activity where they would basically plot on a graph a lot of different samples to start understanding what goes where on these types of data. And then I had them eventually analyze an actual sample that Dr. Corey's lab obtained from an Arctic stream and characterize it using the sort of the information that they obtained from kind of previous sort of more scaffolded stuff. So it's pretty cool. I kind of got interrupted, obviously, as I'm sure everyone did, by the COVID-19, in that I didn't get to run these as much with students as I wanted to. But I did have a lot of student help in the trials. I had students stick around after school and help me out with a lot of the photo exposure stuff. And so I got them involved, and I think they were really enthused to help me design the activities. So that's it from me. I probably went on way too long.
No, it was perfect. It was awesome. Thank you so much. Good way to start the whole session and sharing. So, well, first of all, is there anybody that has questions for Dave? And I can't see you, so you just have to unmute yourself and blab on. Okay. So Rose, I would just like you to chime in here real quickly. Can you just give us a takeaway from what it was like working with a teacher? I know you've had several in the past, but and anything else that you want to add to what David talked about?
Well, yeah, it was great once again let me see where I've lost the whole view. Hang on, whatever. Okay, I assume you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so especially this year, presenting at the PolarTREC session at AGU, it was nice again to, and then I also got asked to write up some of these PolarTREC experiences in one of the AGU blogs. And so that was a great opportunity to compile the outreach done by Bruce and Regina and David over the years. And it just reaffirmed for me actually seeing the data that the PolarTREC program really maximizes this multiplicative effect of making the science and what it's like to be a scientist available to so many more students than we could reach just by ourselves as researchers. So, you know, again, David has been great at that and has done it in his own way, different from the other teachers. And that's what's so valuable about this program, is everyone brings in their own experience in their own classrooms and then translates what we do into that. So again, it was a great experience. And David is still working on things. We've got a manuscript plan to submit on the stuff that he is doing with these cool photo bleaching videos that we want to submit to like Journal of Chemical Education or Geoscience Education.
Wow, that's fantastic. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Rose and Dave. Okay, moving on. We're going to switch over to, it looks like, Allie and her team. So Allie, go ahead.
Hi. So I realized that I didn't put a picture in here of a presentation I did. So I got to go to the Science Teachers Association of Texas conference in Dallas, and it's called the Conference for the Advancement of Science Teaching. And that was back in November. So I didn't have my lessons done. They were like mostly done, but not like polished yet. So I did talk a little bit about like what I was working on and writing, but mostly I promoted PolarTREC and, you know, what they offer teachers and things like that, and not just, you know, going on an expedition, but also the website and what they can find, because there's a lot of teachers that have problems finding, you know, resources on climate change and environmental science stuff. So that was really, really cool. That was a lot of fun that I got to do that. And in terms of like the lessons that I did or wrote, there were some where the kids were going to be looking at the green seeker data and thaw depth and things like that, and also freeze burn plots, which I thought was really fascinating. So during the winter, some vegetation will get uncovered because it's uncharacteristically warm, and then snowstorms will come through and damage that vegetation because it's not covered by snow. And so Steve and Jeremy are looking at those freeze burn plots and comparing them to plots, vegetation plots that do stay covered throughout the entire winter. And I really wanted to share that with my kids, but we were about to start that right after spring break and start getting like really deep into that topic. Jeremy was supposed to come and visit also, but COVID messed that up too. But what we did do is we got to do a Zoom with my kids, and I kept telling them, you know, I'm gonna start getting, you know, scientists to talk to you guys, and they kept saying, is it gonna be Jeremy? Is it gonna be Jeremy? Because I've been talking about Jeremy all year long, all the time, and so they were super excited about meeting him. But I'm hoping that this next year, maybe even earlier or something, we'll get him to come down to Eagle Pass. And since those kids are going to be 8th graders and they're still at my campus, they can, you know, come and meet Jeremy too. But yeah, it was a really great experience. I'm excited about sharing it with next year's kids too, and actually being able to do the labs and things that I wrote with them, and, you know, introducing them to Jeremy and everything that I've done. So it's been great. The only thing that maybe was a little disappointing was I was trying really hard to get my district to work with me to try to go and visit other schools and, you know, share what I had learned with PolarTREC, and they weren't really receptive to that for multiple reasons and scheduling conflicts and things like that. But we've got a new science coordinator that's kind of still getting his feet wet. So maybe next year I'll be able to go like visit the high schools and talk to the environmental science classes about PolarTREC and what I did, and get them involved. And then, you know, maybe somehow we can get them to also meet Jeremy as well when he comes down.
All right, excellent. I love slow-mo. Let's hear from Jeremy and Steve. I'll let you guys pipe in on working with Allie and you know, just kind of what you thought about having an educator in the field with you.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. It was fantastic working with Ollie, of course. And the field season went off so well last year, and she was so much help in the field, and hopefully we were able to help her gather some resources for her classroom. And this spring, as she pointed out, we had some plans that didn't quite go off the way we wanted them to. First off, with COVID-19, me being able to visit Eagle Pass, but also we had our AI ITEX meeting in El Paso in late February, and Ale, due to a scheduling conflict, wasn't able to come, but we were able to bring Melissa Lau from the year before, from 2018, and then our incoming 2020, I guess, /2021 PolarTREC teacher, Eliza Bachman. And so they were able to come. But, and then as Ali pointed out, it was great to be able to zoom in to her class and present to them and show them kind of what the experience that she had from my end of it. And then we spent, I don't know, over half the time just answering random questions for students. So it was great.
Awesome. You were a little bit having a little bit of audio issues there, but it's okay. I think we got it. And now, of course, you're clear. Thanks.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to add anything?
I'll just add a little bit. Actually, I only overlap with Ali up at Utqiagvik, and when we were trying to get to Atkasuk, and because of all these issues with Raven, the air service provider to Atkasuk, it was like really one fiasco after another. It's like, we're going to go, we're not going to go, we're going to go, we're not going to go. But Ali eventually did get down there, and she got to experience the whole thing of a tiny little Arctic village and flying on the little planes. And of course, Raven, Alaska has gone bankrupt. That whole thing is gone. I guess Right Air has stepped in now, but that whole experience is kind of a prelude to what happened to Raven. You know, I don't know. But I didn't get to overlap with her at Toolik. I was only up at Barrow. I'd already been to Toolik and was on my way out. So Jeremy gets all the fun. And it sounds like he had it.
Sounds like it. All right, thank you. I think Judy, is Amanda on? Did she make it?
No, Amanda's not on.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna skip hers for a moment, and we don't have a slide, I believe, for Kate. Kate's expeditions, not Katie, Kate Steepers. So Kate, if you're still on the phone, would you like to speak to your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I don't have a slide because I ended my time at my school last week with like finals and graduation and stuff. Because I was leaving the school, they took all of my equipment and like my technology. So I'm in the process of trying to get a laptop, but I have been unable to, and I'm moving at the same time. So I've been unable to sort of generate a slide for you guys. So I'm just gonna have to kind of talk about it. So I think obviously sort of the beauty of the Arctic was one of the things that really sort of like stuck with me. Also, so I have a background in muscle stem cell research, which, you know, is entirely indoors and very, very sort of controlled and contained. And so obviously I was kind of looking at like the similarities and differences between sort of that kind of lab work and field work. And obviously, you know, careful data collection is like a hallmark of both. But something that I was really reflecting on was the need for sort of that careful logistics planning, because when you go out in the field and you don't have, you know, you're going to go out to this remote site and you don't have certain equipment and you don't have certain variable setup and stuff, you are losing valuable time. So that was something that sort of I reflected on a little bit. I did do some presentations in department meetings and in staff meetings. Unfortunately, a lot of my outreach is on hold because of the COVID issue. I also sort of had issues with the fact that we went on this remote distance learning right at the time where I was starting to try to ramp up a climate change unit and work in all of my PolarTREC experience. So I did sort of go through some like Arctic webinar or WebQuest with the kids, and we went through this whole climate change unit. I did have them kind of analyze some graphs looking at nitrogen fixing and non-nitrogen fixing shrubs, predicting sort of having them predict a change in the future. And then in that process of nitrogen fixing, ammonia is created, which can get oxidized and broken down into nitrous oxide. And so then I had them do sort of a claim evidence and reasoning on comparing nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide. So that was kind of one little small activity. I would have liked to do some more labs and things, but obviously with COVID, things kind of got crushed. My plans for the future are sort of on hold. So I left my job because I'm pregnant, and so I'm going to take some time off of teaching. I do have some contacts that I might be able to kind of work into the classroom, some of my experiences with some of my other teacher friends. So I might be able to kind of work it back in maybe in another year or two. But right now things are a little bit on hold.
Yeah,
so yeah.
No lack for busyness, but my goodness. Got a lot going on.
It's been a crazy year.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask you before we turn it over to Doni and get her perspective was, what was one of the things you valued the most after going into the field with the scientists? Like, what's...
You know, I really enjoyed sort of that renewed experience of being able to participate firsthand in sort of extracting new data. I hadn't done that in years, and sort of being a part of a team again, and being able to sort of participate in that part of that experience sort of was invigorating and inspiring, because I had been in the classroom for a few years, and I had just been sort of doing the data analysis end with the kids, and not so much the sort of extracting the data. So looking at it from sort of a field science perspective was, I think, really useful.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Doni, anything you'd like to add and or your thoughts about working with educators?
Well, first of all, congratulations, Kate. That's really exciting news about your having a baby soon. Yeah, I enjoyed working with Kate, and I enjoyed working with Svea the previous year. I feel like both of them were immensely helpful to the project, and I feel like specifically thinking of Kate this year, like she had to deal with a lot of challenges that were not what she was used to, but she totally rose to the challenge and handled all the new experiences really well. So I appreciated that about her, and she had good ideas. A bit like Kate described, this spring was kind of different for me than I was expecting, in that because the research labs at UAF were shut down, we did not complete the analysis of the samples that we collected with Kate. So those data are still in progress. Hopefully we'll be able to finish them up this summer. And then of course the move to online teaching for me was also kind of a challenge, but one that I got through. So yeah, so I would say I feel like my experiences with PolarTREC have been really uniformly positive. I feel like it's a great way to get outreach into the K-12 school systems, and I feel like the teachers that have joined me have all gotten something really positive out of the experience for themselves as well as what they do for their students. So I would just like to thank you all very much.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. Thank you for sharing, both of you. Okay, I think we're going to move on to Piper and Lee here. Oops, sorry, going too far there. All right, Piper.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Piper Bartlett. My project was the Northern Chukchi Integrated Study, and I was working with Dr. Lee Cooper on a project called the Distributed Biological Observatory, which is a series of sampling sites in the Bering and Chukchi Sea that are chosen for their high biodiversity and biomass. And so I was ship-based the entire expedition, which was really cool. And the really interesting thing about this project is, first of all, it has a really long data set, and there's a lot of different types of data that goes along with it. So when I was on this ship, my project was specifically looking at benthic organisms, but there were a variety of other researchers taking samples at these sites, from atmospheric to physical oceanography, marine mammals, birds, harmful algal blooms, and things like that. So I got to interact with a number of different people and really be integrated into the research team that I was with. So that was really neat. So we were collecting data in kind of two different ways. First was using core samples. So we were taking core samples to look at oxygen consumption of the organisms on the bottom. And we were also using Van Veen grabs to collect species and kind of hose them off and then look at the biomass and biodiversity at each of these different sampling sites. So it was a lot of time on the deck, and I'm in red a lot. I think I'm in a suit in every one of these photos. And so we were taking a look at that. So I kind of based my curriculum off of that experience that I had. There's a picture in kind of the bottom right corner of kids looking at some videos that were taken of the bottom. And so what they were doing is identifying the different benthic species that we had actually brought up onto the ship deck, but they got to see them in the video, identify them and identify what type of feeder they are, and then use some data that we had collected on the sediment samples to kind of identify what species goes with what type of feeding sediment samples, and they took a look at that. So that was one of the pieces of curriculum that I put together, and there are some kids doing that there pre-COVID. And then kind of, you know, my plans got derailed a little bit with COVID like everybody else, but I had a respiration activity lab that I was going to be doing with bivalves with my kids, which we got kind of halfway through and then had to abandon. So hopefully I'll get to do that in full next year, but that should be a pretty neat project. I was really fortunate in that I got to do a lot of outreach with organizations that had me before my trip and then after. So I kind of got to do follow-ups with a lot of people in the community and schools as well. So that was kind of neat. I also went to the Ocean Sciences meeting in San Diego this past year and had an e-poster. So I was presenting some of the curriculum that I had done. I've done some physical oceanography labs with kids. And yeah, just a number of other things that I've kind of started to put together for curriculum, but hopefully COVID will come back or not come back and we get to go back to school. Some of the cool things that I really liked, or the kids really enjoyed, that I was kind of surprised that they liked, was learning about the equipment and some of the sampling equipment that we used, which was kind of cool that they were interested in that and kind of develop, like learning where all of that data came from. Yeah, and I think that's it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Lots going on here. Awesome. And you are in orange a lot.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. It's a good, safe thing. All right. Lee, is there anything you would like to add or share with us about working with Piper?
Well, it was super great to have another PolarTREC teacher, and they're always excellent. But I think we've made some nice strides with Piper in developing these lesson plans, because we don't always manage to get to that step. And I think that really is productive and helpful for our project. We were going to have Piper come down in June, or maybe last week, something like that, to visit the lab, but not much is happening in the lab right now. We just started sending people in to identify some of the, they have to keep their 6 feet distances from their microscopes, but we are working on these samples, so we just started this week. I don't think I have too much more to say, except that the COVID-19 really had a big interruption, because we barely got home from San Diego, I guess, in February, and everything got locked down. But it was a super experience as always, and I thank Piper for going through that effort to join us and help at sea.
Yeah, and I was glad that you guys, that was one of the last conferences I think that most people went to. So I'm glad that you were all able to co-present there. That worked.
Yeah, and we'll reschedule that lab meeting and continue. I've got another lab lesson, or another teaching lesson to look at now that Piper's put on my desk. So, and we're those videos that you see in the lower right-hand corner, being home for a couple of months, we've got those a little better organized. So I think we're moving forward on, we're not doing as much in the lab, but we're moving ahead still with some other things that are helping us get better organized in terms of using the products of the PolarTREC experience.
Okay, thanks, you too. All All right, I'm going to switch over to the Mosaic Expedition. So Katie Gavinas, if you're on. I'm sorry, I can't see all of you very well, so step in. Okay.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to be able to participate in the Mosaic Expedition in late September and October of last year. And that is the multidisciplinary observant, oh gosh, I can't ever remember. It's in the Central Arctic Ocean and it's multidisciplinary, and it's a floating observation station where the polar stern is kind of moored into the sea ice and drifts from 85 degrees north, kind of north of Siberia, across the pole, and then out into the North Atlantic Ocean. And it's drifting faster than they expected. So they actually are likely, they had to leave the ice anyway to do some crew switching out because of the lack of access to icebreakers and planes due to the COVID pandemic. But they also are probably going to actually need to, when they return, go farther north into the ice so that they can make it through to August drifting, because the ice moved faster than they expected. So there's lots of, it's really fun actually to be able to continue to follow the expedition because it is a year-long expedition. And particularly in the current situation, just thinking about how these massive research efforts adapt to something like COVID-19, and then also just the realities of a rapidly changing Arctic and what it means to try to study a system that is now fairly unpredictable. So that's been really fun, and I mean, challenging, but also now from my couch to kind of watch how they're working on that and to get some of the early updates on what Plan B and C and D and Plan Z are. So that's been really interesting. I returned, so when I was out on the ship, I was working primarily with the atmospheric team, and we were actually on a support ship, the Fedorov, that was setting up the distributed network. And so the right-hand picture here shows kind of the MET-SLED research team. We placed 3 of these atmospheric surface flux stations out onto the ice around the polar stern to gather more data away from the ship itself. And then there was a really extensive distributed network of oceanographical and biological and sea ice and snow and atmospheric data that's collected away from the ship as well as closer to that main ice camp. And then the other thing that was really fun is that there was a larger group of educators involved. So the researcher I was paired with, actually, Anna Gold, is more of an education researcher, though her background is also in atmospheric science. So that was a really nice bridge. And then there are also other educators from Germany on board. So it was fun to collaborate with them. And a big focus for me has been kind of how to take the science that is happening almost as far as you can get from human habitation on the planet, except for Antarctica. Though I guess there is people who live year-round in Antarctica. So maybe it's as far as you can get from human habitation on the planet, how to take that and bring it into a place-based learning system, which is what my focus is as an informal science educator. So how to connect people's, and especially kids, local places and ecosystem with the Arctic, and especially how to do that in hands-on field studies and labs and games and other outdoor activities, especially kind of in an after-school context, and looking at some community-based monitoring projects. And I was gifted something pretty amazing when I got back to Homer. I was down in Washington State for a little while, and then I returned to Homer on, like, I don't know, December 27th, 2019. And in January, for all of January, the air temperature never got above 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And so for the first time in about a decade, we had true sea ice on Kachemak Bay. And so I was able to really pretty miraculously be able to go out and get chunks of that sea ice and do hands-on exploration of it with local kids and after-school programs, learning about kind of how sea ice forms. And you know, we didn't have a sea ice ecosystem going on there because this is a fairly temporary things, but we could explore the brine channels and use that as a jumping off point for how things might be able to live in sea ice. And we were comparing freshwater and saltwater samples. And so that was a really fun and unexpected way to connect to the Arctic Ocean. And it was also a time when kind of everyone in Homer was really fascinated by the sea ice. So there was a lot of excitement, and people were just really keyed into this, this thing that happened for us. Like our harbor was frozen over for all of January, and you could go out and, like, you know, not quite walk on it. They've warned you not to do that, but it was pretty cool. So I was doing quite a few after activities with our after school programs, then a Girl Scout group. And then everything stopped. And so since then have done some digital things, but it really slowed down quite a bit. We were supposed to present at NSTA, and I was going to be involved in some teacher workshops as well. And all those have sort of been put on hold. But for coastal studies, we are very slowly starting to do in-person programs again. I've been wearing my face covering every day for multiple hours. But that's exciting to be able to work with kids in our local community, especially since they haven't gotten to interact with each other in a while, and they haven't gotten to learn outside. And so we're being real cautious about it, but you know, trying to provide some pretty rich place-based learning opportunities this summer for local kids and kids from kind of a little farther in Alaska as well. We've got a couple schools that we're working with. So starting to think now that we know what's on the calendar, where there might be places to link back into the research of the Mosaic Expedition. And Anna and I are going to chat in a couple weeks as well about they also had to do some pretty significant changes to their plans at UC Boulder, but going to touch base here pretty soon now that some things have solidified a little bit of what comes next for them and where I can plug into that.
Thank you so much for sharing. Anna had to go earlier, so because she had some online classes she was doing. So anyway, we look forward. Mosaic has certainly not ended. It still keeps on going. So we'll be able to catch up with you guys and where that all the science here in the is still happening. So it's an exciting project to watch. And the science group is still sending, if you haven't been following, they're still sending out news and have a listserv, and their website has lots of updates about what's going on. So lots of good stuff still coming out of that project. So thanks. We're gonna go to Monica right now, who's standing by. She doesn't have a slide, but that's okay. I'll go back to that flyer. And Monica, can you just speak to your expedition here?
Oh, yes. Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. So I got to spend 5 weeks in the Arctic, in Utqiagvik, in the North Shore of Alaska, at Toolik Field Station and at Kasuk as well, doing several different projects with Dr. Craig Tweedy and Dr. Vanessa Lafitte. And I had so many different projects that one day I'd be out in the Chukchi Sea, and the other time we'd fly to Atkasuk, and looking at I mostly worked with the team that was doing all of the LiDAR work and all of the drone research and being out in the field for various things. Sometimes we were collecting benthic, samples off the seafloor. And so I really got like a massive experience of just so many different things that I was very grateful for. So it was just amazing. I also participated in February with Dr. Craig Tweedy and Dr. Jeremy May and Dr. Stephen Overbauer in the ITEX, meeting that we had here in El Paso. So it was nice to meet and see everybody. And I also got to meet Polar Trekkers, Melissa Lau and Liza as well. So very interesting to be able to share some of my experiences and compare to their experiences. And also Liza, who's an upcoming, Polar Trekker going into her expedition, after this whole quarantine is over, being able to give her advice and share our own experiences and what she should expect was very good. In the classroom, we've had a very challenging time trying to, with the quarantine, I was not able to do everything that I would have liked to have done, but I did focus on some of our LiDAR and drone work and seeing how it relates when we teach kids about spectrophotometry and the electromagnetic spectrum and waves. So that really tied into, this abstract concept and how it's actually used out in the field, and so how to build those relationships with students. A lot of more of the greenhouse gases and carbon cycling that I like to teach, were put on hold because of the quarantine, and it was a very challenging time at our school. Two of our colleagues passed away, and one of our colleagues was one of my very close colleagues, so I had to take over his classes after his passing during this quarantine. So I went from 140 students to 300 students doing the virtual teaching. So I've just been very, very overwhelmed. And I'm really, really hoping to get Dr. Craig Tweedy's team in as well, which we weren't able to do some of those important meetings that we wanted because of this situation. And as soon as we start getting the okay, we'll start making some plans to do so this coming year. So far, when we begin classes, we know that we will not be at 100% capacity. We're going to be doing some virtual teaching, whether it's partial or whether we'll be partly in class and partly virtual, depending on where the state of New Mexico's opening phases are. But we have been pretty much told you're not starting normally anymore, at least for the first couple of months. So that puts a new challenge on us as well. But we're really, really hoping to get everything going and to be able to make those plans much more, set them in place. So I'm actually shifting into teaching physics, earth and space science next year, which is great because it's going to give me a lot more opportunities to bring in my PolarTREC experience more than it did with just teaching chemistry. And so I'm really excited about that, being able to share the PolarTREC experience much more in depth and build lessons and curriculum further than what I was able to do with my chemistry teaching curriculum. So that's exciting for me. I did get to do some local outreach with teachers and talk about my experience with PolarTREC and why they should join also as well. So that was exciting. Some of the outreach that I had planned for this summer, of course, we couldn't do, and our sessions had to be postponed. So hopefully starting next summer's sessions, I can be able to share even more of these experiences. But, I'm very excited that even though our plans have been put on hold, we can still continue next year as soon as we're able to.
All right. Thank you. I can't believe how many students you had to take on online learning. That sounds crazy.
Yeah, it was almost a 24/7 job. And I had students calling me at 9 o'clock at night. And yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever worked so many hours nonstop during this time. But we had to do what we had to do to meet the needs of our students. So just trying to do the best we could.
Sounds like it. All right. Thanks, Monica, for sharing. I think now we're gonna go from the Arctic down to the Antarctic. And I think right now it's Bridget. So Bridget, if you'd like to share your slide, please.
Hey everybody, so I'm Bridget. I live in Massachusetts and I was on the Weddell seals growing up on ICE project. Being on this team, I realized that we weren't actually just researching one thing, that there was a few different projects going on, including Heather Luanig's metabolic rates and Linnea's body mass measurements. And there was like lice collection and blood percentages and everything else. And what I learned primarily was there was so much research going on and that everyone just helped everyone. It wasn't like, oh no, that's your project, that's not my project. We just had a list that we had to get through every day, and it didn't matter whose project it was. We all got it done together. And I honestly don't think we could have done any of it without each other. So knowing the value of a team was very prominent in this expedition. So that's our team in our hut. We did go out every day. I did not put a baby seal on my slide, so I put one behind me. So I've been working with Heather. We created a blubber lab to find out how blubber affects the temperature of a water inside balloon. It's a very messy, fun lab to do. Believe me, if you guys attempt the lab that we worked on, make sure you have a Crisco table, and that is the only table that the Crisco goes on, because you're not getting it off of any other table. So that's crazy. It was so much fun too. The kids made such a mess. The janitors got called by other teachers on the floor, but it was fun. So make sure you have a nice clean space to mess up. Right now I'm working with Linnea on the growth rate information, and we're actually making a basic algebra lesson, figuring out growth rate, and it's actually working out really well as we're running the numbers. And hopefully I'm thinking about tying it in with the blubber lab, because we actually have blubber measurements and we can track the rate of blubber development on the baby over the weeks of the experiment. Again, I'm sure like everyone else, COVID-19's kind of interrupted the reach out, but I also had New England winter. So I tried to set some stuff up when we got back, and everyone was like, can you just wait till the spring? This way we don't have a snowstorm. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll totally do it in the end of March. And the end of March came and nothing is open. So I have set up a few events, hopefully when we come back. And then I've also started working with teachers at other high schools to set up times when we're allowed to see each other again, to create lessons. And I'm actually going to be switching to ecology instead of biology. And Heather is so excited about that, because elephant seals are her true passion, and she has so many lessons that she wants to try out on my students, which is great. But other than that, I think just also being down at McMurdo Station and realizing how much work goes into everything, and having a personal rock star down there, Elaine Hood, to show you around and make you really stand out in a crowd and introduce you to everyone. I really met a lot of people, and I learned so much more than what my team alone was studying. So that was pretty fantastic.
Nice. Thank you, Bridget, for sharing all that. That was awesome. Yeah, I think the major theme of this webinar is that everybody had something they wanted to do, but can't do it quite yet. So hopefully we'll either be more creative and figure out different ways to share, or we'll get the opportunity. So Heather signed off, but I think she shared with Judy something. So Judy, do you want to share what Heather?
Yes, Heather had to head off to another meeting, but she says that
to have Bridget along with her was fantastic, and she's looking forward to fleshing out more lesson plans with her. She, being Bridget, was supposed to come visit now-ish, so I hope we get a chance to have her come out when everything opens safely again.
Sounds good. All right, thank you, Judy and Bridget. All right, we're moving on to, I believe, hopefully Amy Osbourne is still with us. Team Sea Spider. Sorry. So Amy, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Osbourne again. I was down at McMurdo Station with Dr. Amy Moran, and I have to say my highlight is right there in the middle, which is hanging out with all these, my team of amazing researchers. So there's Erin all the way on the left, and Graham and Amy, and then me, the other Amy, on the sea ice. And I think similar to what someone said earlier, just field research. I've done field research with kids, but I haven't done field research with researchers. So that was really fun and exciting to do and to participate in that and be out on the ice, and just being in Antarctica itself was a huge highlight. And I think similar to what Bridget just said, just having so many people around you who you can learn from, not just my team, but I had a chance to go out with the Weddell SEAL team and hang out with the fish crowd, and then actually got to go see lasers and launch weather balloons, and just everybody's so excited about science, and seeing all these adults, whether they're in Antarctica as a carpenter or a dishwasher, just they're so excited to know what's going on there. So that was a really huge highlight for me, and the conversations I got to have with Erin, Graham, and Amy about education and science education were really meaningful. And I like to think a lot about pedagogy and the way we teach science and things like that. So that was great. So what I did, so I was down there and then came back, and that was sad. I didn't really want to leave Antarctica. I enjoyed it, and also like Bridget, just having a lane down there too was incredible, and having Bridget and Denise too, as we talked about what we were doing with each other as well. So that was nice. But yeah, I came back, and actually as soon as I got back, I flew into Los Angeles and went to my friend's kids' preschool. So that was the first group of students I saw when I got back, and it was fun to talk to a bunch of preschoolers about what I had done down there. I'm sad I didn't put a sea spider on this slide, because that was probably another highlight, was interacting with the animals, but then getting to tell students about those animals, and that was really fun. And then I also, I think my outreach strategy has sort of just been to communicate with as many people as possible that I did this trip, and if anyone wants to know about it, I am here to talk about it. So I ended up talking to the Natural History Society in my hometown in Ohio right before the holidays, the winter holidays. And that was great. And that sort of led me to a learning and retirement crowd. So I was contacted by UC Davis to do one of their learning and retirement programs. And I think that's still going to happen. That's going to be this fall about my trip. And then, but student-wise, and students I worked with, so similar to Katie, I teach, place-based education is my main focus. I teach in outdoor education. And so one of the exciting things that I did and was excited to do was to figure out, how do I connect my experience in the Antarctica to an organization that really focuses on place and teaching in your place and learning from the place where you are. And we are along the Pacific Ocean, so it's nice to think of it as one big ocean. So sort of as I get back here to again, we'll put onto my PolarTREC page, but takes an activity that we had done at Nature Bridge. And I also should say I talk to Nature Bridge educators a lot about what they were wanting and needing, because I don't want it to be just me who does this. I want the other educators at NatureBridge to do this too. And so we were talking about local animals and the impacts of climate change. And so I took an activity we already do as a team building activity, which is a jump rope challenge, and I adapted it to be more about the impacts of the warming ocean on the sea spiders and sea slugs in Antarctica. And then I took that and connected it. I focus on 5 different species off the California coast that are being impacted by, that scientists are thinking are going to be impacted by warming oceans, both in a positive way, like an expanse of range and population size, or in a really challenging way, so like decrease in population, decrease in amount of food available. So that's the lesson that I put together, but I've only done the one jump rope part of it with kids, and I didn't get a picture of it, so that's not on here. And then the other lesson, I'm actually working on a second lesson that I did do with kids. I just need to type it up and send it to Amy. Was one about, we have a marine lab where I work, and so it's one where I have some ice and then some hot water, and I put our hermit crabs in a separate tub over top of that, and with some thermometers in it, and see which ones they prefer, whether they want the hot or the cold. So we kind of time it for 10 minutes, and I did it with kids, and we had a lot of fun just sort of marking off where the hermit crabs were throughout the 10-minute time period, and what the different temperatures were of the water. And then they created their own inquiry and investigations that they wanted to do in the lab too. So that was sort of an introduction to what we're going to do there. Yeah, it was fun. It was great. Thanks, Katie. And then, yeah, actually, so similar to everybody else, had a little bit of delay in outreach due to COVID. My organization actually stopped serving students. So at the end of March, we didn't have students anymore. And so that has been interesting, and everybody's been furloughed. And so now I actually ended up doing a Zoom call with an 8th grade teacher from my hometown who reached out to me. And so I have done, I did that as an outreach, but I was supposed to table at the Cal Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. So I'm hoping that can still happen maybe in the fall. But one interesting thing that's kind of come out of all of this is, too, is that I am probably headed back into the classroom up in Tahoe at a public Waldorf school that focuses on place-based education too. So I've been thinking about how to translate my Antarctic experience to that experience. That's one opportunity. And then another opportunity is that NatureBridge is trying to figure out what they're going to do in the fall, because probably kids won't get to come and spend the night anymore, at least for the near future. And so we've been talking about whether we can go into classrooms or what things are going to look like. And I was like, well, we have these lessons, like here's some lessons that are created that we could do in the classroom too. So yeah, I think that's about it. But it's, oh yeah, and Amy, I know we put in a proposal to present at the National Marine Educators Association conference. I don't even know where that landed, but I know the conference is canceled this year. And I was trying to figure out a way to get down there to see her in Hawaii too. And yeah, I think that's about covers it, but it's amazing. And I'm excited to see, continue to think of ways to connect place-based ed and Antarctica, because I love it there. Want to bring it to as many people as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy O, for sharing there. Lots of great ideas. And at some point, you and Katie G need to catch up. She had lots of things she's interested in seeing there. So I'm going to turn this over to Amy Moran. Is there anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, it was really fantastic working with Amy. She was really fun and like a complete team member and helped with every aspect of it. And she was, this was the same with the previous educators I've worked with. Just so excited about everything that it was really sort of good for team morale in a lot of ways. And we were, yeah, and it's been really fun working with her since. And I think the COVID thing has thrown everyone a bit. But we are hoping the National Marine Educators Association was postponed a year. So we're hoping, I think we're gonna have to resubmit the abstract. They're making everybody resubmit them, but we're hoping this will actually maybe even give us more time to get together with Tim Dwyer, who is a past educator, and put together a presentation about how to communicate these thermal concepts in a lot of different ways.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next one, which I think is Denise. Yeah, it is. All right, Denise, would you care to share your slide?
Absolutely. I kept it kind of simple. But to start off with, I think my time in Antarctica was absolutely amazing, and have a chance to work with Anne and the team was just like a life-changing experience. I got down there and I think I felt like I floundered a little bit, and then they made me feel so welcome and got me started working on some projects, and I could really see where I could integrate a lot of what they were doing into my classroom as well. So that part worked out really well. Dr. Tajim's been helping me work on some lessons. I haven't gotten typed up yet with all this COVID stuff, but basically what we're looking at is recreating some of what she was doing in the classroom with different species. So like taking zebrafish and setting up tanks at different temperature gradients and seeing how they respond. Now we can't do all the kind of research that she was doing, but students can do some of the behavior stuff that we were doing. And I think that's gonna be really interesting. I had kind of scheduled to set that up for a STEM camp I was doing this summer, but of course that kind of fell apart. When I got back in the end of November, I was actually able to set up quite a bit of outreach in December. So that worked out really nicely. I did some Rotary clubs and local stuff like that, and did quite a few different classrooms at like my daughter's school up in Chico, and then around here in Central California locally too. So I got quite a bit of outreach done before everything kind of fell apart. But what I didn't get to do is to incorporate it into my classroom as much as I wanted to. That was kind of all planned for the spring. And then of course that kind of fell apart. We weren't able to do that very much through distance learning. But overall, the experience has just been phenomenal. And I'm really looking forward to be able to continue to incorporate more into what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be moving schools, which is huge for me because I've been at the same little tiny school for 25 years. So moving to a big school is going to be interesting to try and incorporate it into the system that they already have in place. But one of the things I think was the most surprising to me is not the like formal outreach that I've done, but in the little conversations that I've had, both in the classroom, just as in like a shared experience I've had with the kids, because they were able to be with me sort of in Antarctica and a lot of the things that we were doing. And, if we were setting up a lab, I could refer to it, when I was in Antarctica, remember how Dr. Tajim did this, or how Mandy had us doing that, or, I could refer to some of the procedures and some of the decisions that were made in Antarctica to help them with some of the challenges that they were facing in the labs in class. And so it wasn't a formal thing, but it was just in the little day-to-day things that we could tie in kind of that shared experience. And then in the community, it's given me a chance to start conversations that I definitely wouldn't have had. I live in a very rural area that's very conservative, to say the least. And so the topic of climate change sometimes can be very tricky to bring up. And with all these people now asking me, so how was your trip to Antarctica? It kind of started conversations that would never have happened. And, some of the community members now actually kind of look at me more as not an expert, but, I've been there at least. And so they actually listen to what I'm saying with what's going on with the climate in Antarctica. And those kind of conversations would never have happened if I hadn't gone. And so that was something that's kind of unexpected outreach that I've been doing that's kind of come along with it. So I will obviously continue to do that as I am able to talk to more people again when things start to open up. And we were trying to have Dr. Tajim and maybe one other team member come down in the spring, and of course that didn't work. So I'm hoping maybe something works out and they might be able to come down and meet my new students when I start at my new school in the fall.
Awesome. I like that about that ability to open and have more open conversations about things that you wouldn't have normally been able to do. That is definitely, that's nice because that reaches out to like people you would never have thought to otherwise. So let's see, Anne, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I like everyone on here, I think the PolarTREC program is amazing. I think having Denise join us and have her energy and her experience in teaching science for, with a real diverse group of students was incredibly essential. And I guess I just tell everyone that I learned as much from Denise as I think Denise learned from us. So, it was really important. We do, like some other people have talked about, Bridget said, we're running a bunch of experiments at the same time. And so there are times when we need everyone's hands on deck. And so Denise was crucial in those experiments, but also would come back afterwards and say, I noticed you do this. Why do you do that? Or I notice in your experiments, you spend a lot of time before the experiment organizing all these things. And just, I guess, having those conversations with her made me realize there's so much of what we do that we don't actually articulate. And so it helps, I think it helps in our science communication in terms of the scientific method. I had great conversation. So this is the piston bully that she's showing, and great conversation sitting in the front of the piston bully, talking about science standards in California or nationals. I'm still learning, right? So in hearing about how science is communicated in the classroom helps us think about how to get our science into the classroom, right? Understanding firsthand how it works really helps us. And so I thought that was phenomenal. I think one thing that Denise hit on is exactly what one of the unexpected highlights is this sort of like adult learning that happened and getting climate change at the forefront of discussion for people who don't really believe the science. And here you have someone in front of you who is down there and isn't a scary academic and can speak to what they saw, can speak to what their experiences were, can speak to the data in a way that's maybe more understandable than how I might produce it. And so I think that was a phenomenal plus. And then my last plug is, I know it's hard for PolarTREC to coordinate this, but I would also plug that having multiple PolarTREC teachers together was really phenomenal. Not only for the teachers who we've heard a lot about, but I think also for the PIs, having a cohort where we could have bigger discussions about the program, about getting this into the classroom was great. So if there's any way to facilitate that every odd time, that would be phenomenal. But yeah, Denise, it was a pleasure. I look forward to continuing to work really hard. And I think we actually would have gone further in action plans if I wasn't so consumed by teaching in the time of COVID. So yeah, to the future.
To the future, indeed. Thank you, Anne, for those insights. Very valuable to have your perspective. Also, you were one of the few researchers in this particular cohort that was new to having host an educator. So thank you. Okay, good job. We are going to move on to Jocelyn and the Ice Cube project. So
yes, Ice Cube, oh, the South Pole. I miss it so much. So I went to the South Pole with the Ice Cube in the Ascarian Radio Expedition. Here is our group here. Such a nice picture. That was actually one of the warmer days, which was maybe -15, and the sun felt really bright, and our red parka felt almost a little bit too warm. So I went down to the South Pole kind of last minute. I got pulled into PolarTREC kind of around July, which was scary in itself, having to prepare to go to the South Pole and then wrap my head around it and then figure out how to really be present, but also take advantage of the opportunity to amass as much content as possible to bring back and do outreach. So I'm an informal educator in California. Very specifically, I have a science show called Jari the Science Girl, which tours to theaters. It's geared for students K through 6, and it's an hour-long science show, just what it sounds like, on stage. It has volunteers, but it has a lot of like magical theatrical elements tied into it. And it's really like the point of the show and the function of it is as a hook or as a door for students to demystify science, get encouraged, gain confidence, and then learn about the different types of science and the different things they can do with it. So getting the opportunity to go to the South Pole was really awesome, because just to echo something that Kate said earlier, a lot of my personal research experience was in a laboratory or in a clinical setting. So all of the personal experience that I had to pull from was being in a room with 4 walls, very controlled conditions, and going out to the field and working with the scientists that were literally felt like the middle of nowhere with conditions that were so harsh was so different from what I've experienced, and was so interesting. And I am so impressed by the scientists and everyone who works there, the staff who works there, and the conditions are just so unique. And I specifically worked with a subgroup called Spice Corps within IceCube, and we had a field station that was about 2 miles out from the main station, this shack that was heated up by the sun, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we would deploy instruments down into the ice and collect data to better characterize the ice so that they can use that information for their upgrade efforts. And so being out in the middle of what felt like nowhere and seeing how scientists had to prepare for going out every day and how they had to troubleshoot was so different from being indoors. Not only are you troubleshooting data and equipment and the usual obstacles that come with research, but you're troubleshooting the weather, or you're doing it while you're freezing, or you have to take your glove off for half a second because you can't screw the last screw in with your glove. And all of these little things that brought a lot of humanity to the research that's happening at the South Pole. And not to mention just bringing that information that this is happening at the South Pole. I didn't know that so many incredible projects were happening there. And so now I'm excited to tie that back into my platform and to our programs to show students also that the South Pole isn't some weird, unreachable place that who knows what's out there, but it's this really incredible, productive place where you can apply your STEM degree or engineering degree, STEM degree. And you can get some pretty incredible work done, some pretty incredible experiences. So these are just a few of the outreach. So I'm going to start with the same story we've all heard, right? COVID interrupted all of my plans. In the purple on the left, I had a few dates lined up for March. I was lucky to get the first one done. So I visited a Boys and Girls Club in Bell Gardens, which is actually a city that I grew up in. So that was really fun to be able to level with a lot of the students there. We had a lot of same background, same cultural experiences. So I brought the South Pole to them, and we got to talk about a lot of what that entails, what that looks like, and what that means for them, how they can see the world differently and kind of broaden that perspective. And then after all of my other dates got canceled, I switched to online outreach. So now I'm working on taking the one presentation I did and everything I learned from the questions they asked, which I didn't always expect, was to kind of turn that into an online video series that I'm working on now and translate it in a way where it's a lot shorter, a lot more digestible for the internet, because especially kids, and I think adults alike, have very much shorter attention spans when watching informational videos. So I've been working on pulling out what's the lower hanging fruit and what's more of the bigger picture that someone would be interested in learning about Antarctica, and putting it into these like 3-minute videos. One of the things that I did realize doing this one outreach and just talking to like my community in general was, aside from the science, there's also just a lot of gaps in knowledge about the continent in general, like where it is, what's available there, what animals are there, you know, how do you live there, where does the trash go? So just a lot of small gaps of knowledge that add up to a lot and make this continent feel really magical and mystical. So that's kind of the angle that I've been really passionate about, is filling in these small gaps so that when you introduce something as big and incredible like the Ice Cube project, it feels more feasible once you understand the resources that are there and how we get our scientists there and how we get our material there. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to share was I got back right before New Year, and then we had a show scheduled in Torrance on the 26th of January. So it was really close. I didn't have a lot of time to incorporate what I had learned, pictures I had taken and such, into our already built performance. So while I was at the South Pole, I did film a lot of content, a lot of video in character, so that we could easily slip it in. So the picture on the bottom right is a still that one of my coworkers took at the beginning of the show. We have a video where we talk about it being, how the sun is up 24 hours a day and why that is. And it was a nice way to kick off the show, to see this character that some of the students have seen before in a new environment. And I think that that's where we want to take the show and incorporate more elements of that idea that science can be in a lab, and it sure is in a lab, and there's a lot of productive things you can do in a lab, but science is so much more, and that you can go out in the fields, and that it extends beyond this room, and that you know, if they think a laboratory is boring, that doesn't mean science is not for them. Maybe they prefer to work on Antarctica or in a swamp or somewhere that fits their personality better. And then at the very bottom is a USC Young Scientist article that was written about me and the expedition. I have a friend named DJ Cast, who is actually a PolarTREC educator a few years ago, and she spearheads this program at USC. So she wrote this article about the expedition, and hopefully once COVID is safe and more contained, we can plan some more outreach activities where I get to actually visit the program and see what we can do together.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing there. I do believe we have Jim Madsen on, and we'd like to hear his perspective. So go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so first, you know, Jocelyn kind of undersold just how crazy this whole experience has been for everybody. We've been a little snake bit the last few years getting educators to the South Pole. So she did a fantastic job stepping in and going to a very cold place for the first time and being a real trooper. And you know, I think one of the things that excites me is the storytelling aspect of Jocelyn's skill set. So we are working on some virtual reality projects, and we're hoping that those get funded so that we can get those in place. But I would echo what others have said. You know, the teachers, the informal educators are just such amazing people. And it's kind of humbling because we as researchers tend to be very deep in one area, and they really know a lot about multiple things and deal with equal challenges. So I am so hoping to get out to Los Angeles, right, and visit. We tried to connect on some flights I took through before the trip and weren't able to get together. So like everyone, you know, the big story is the impact that the virus has had in terms of plans, but I'm sure we're going to get together. So thanks, Jocelyn.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Jim and Jocelyn, for sharing. A very interesting project and fun to see all the outreach that's been taking place there. I noted in comments earlier that it's really fun to see the breadth and depth of everybody's, the different audiences that you're able to connect with and talk with about this. So very cool. All right, so last but not least is Sara Slack, and she literally, her and Frank just got back in the midst of all this COVIDness. So anxious to hear your story. So go ahead, Sara.
Thank you. So we did arrive back after the New York City Public Schools had already closed down. So I've not been back to my classroom since I left for Antarctica on January 24th. Haven't seen any of my students in person, and most of them don't like using the video on when we have Google Meet. So I literally haven't seen the kids since mid-January, which has been really tough. It's not the experience that I was expecting. I came back with all these new ideas and new energy, and now I sit in front of a computer screen and hope somebody out there is paying attention. So my plans for sharing my PolarTREC experience have mostly been put on hold. My kids seem to struggle with the online learning environment. I'm sure a lot of you have had that same experience. And my class was STEM, so it was really geared towards hands-on projects and engineering design, and to try to turn that into an online based class where kids don't have the space, don't have the resources to design things at home has been nearly impossible. The good news is, though, that that's given me a lot of time to think about the ways I can incorporate the things that I learned, the experiences I had, into I'm hoping to do a year-long climate change-based curriculum for my STEM class next year. So instead of these disparate projects where the kids can use different engineering skills, we're going to have a year-long focus of climate change and use engineering design as a way to build resilience in the face of our changing climate. So my project was Thwaites Offshore Research. I was on the icebreaker in the Nathaniel B. Palmer. We left from Punta Arenas, Chile on January 24th. And the bottom picture on the bottom right shows our path. And the reason the red line is really thick close to the coast of Antarctica is because that's where our ship was zigzagging back and forth extensively. We were mapping the seafloor using different forms of sonar and collecting sediment samples from many different locations. In addition, there were some oceanographers on board the ship who were focused on water chemistry. So we did CTDs, which I believe Piper also did in her experience, and deployed floats and gliders. In the picture in the upper left, I'm decorating one of the gliders with our school's mascot in a name that my students provided, and that will be, or has been, deployed in the Southern Ocean. And one of the projects we'll be looking at, or doing, is looking at the data that's collected and sent back by that glider. There's also a seal out there that's been named Slacker that has a tracker, a tag on its head that is collecting data and then sending that data whenever it surfaces to breathe. So my students will be able to look at that information on water chemistry as well. Slacker with a tracker. Good one, Janet. So the experience was amazing. There were 59 people on board. That included the science crew as well as the actual ship's crew. But I found all of them could provide valuable information for my students. There were people who could speak about STEM careers that kids might not have ever considered. There were people who could explain the science to me when I didn't understand. There were graduate students, there were the PIs, there was our chief scientist, and they all brought different strengths to the program and all supported me in different ways. Anne mentioned earlier the value of having multiple PolarTREC educators on board or as part of, or at McMurdo at the same time. And that is something that I think does hold a lot of value. I would have loved to have a second teacher there to bounce ideas off of, to build curriculum with, just to share the experience with. I think that's a way that PolarTREC could grow potentially, is to have two educators in the same experience, maybe working with different researchers, having a slightly different focus, but that would have been so meaningful to me. We were scheduled to get back right at the end of March. We ended up getting back to dock, but not being able to disembark from the ship for a couple of days while they figured out how to safely transport us to the airport. We, of course, were quarantined when we were traveling on the ship, but the port had issues with people on cruise ships returning and bringing the coronavirus into Punta Arenas, Chile. And so they were very focused on making sure that we went directly from our ship to the airport. We got out and they closed the airport down behind us. So we were the last people to fly out of that airport. I don't know now, Frank, maybe you do, if it's been reopened. But I know some of the Marine tech, some of the support staff had to stay on the ship, and the ship ended up going up to California because there was no other way to get the people and the crew off. So I, enjoyed listening to all your presentations. I thought of all these things I wanted to say while I was hearing them. One of my favorite stories, Jocelyn, point that you made about just how foreign Antarctica is to students, how there's so many pieces of the puzzle there they don't understand. I went on a training just a couple weeks before I was scheduled to leave the classroom. I was out of the classroom for a day for professional development. And when I came back, I had 4 different kids ask me how Antarctica was. They don't know where it is. They don't know just what's involved in getting not just an individual there, but a whole scientific team to accomplish some of the research that we did. Another thing that was really meaningful about this experience for me was that before I left, people started saying, I've never heard of Thwaites before, but now it's in the news all the time. I noticed that too, and I don't know if it was just because more research into Thwaites, more information about how it has is poised on the edge of this catastrophic collapse has been present in the popular press, or if it was just an awareness because I was going, people started thinking about it more. So the impact of your PolarTREC grant can start even before you've left on your project, because people are paying attention more to the research that's happening in the part of the globe that you're going to be at. I haven't done any outreach since I returned. There's not been a single thing open, but I hope to focus on that maybe in the fall as I start this new climate change curriculum in my classroom. And I feel like that was a little bit fractured and also brief, but I had an incredible experience that will always be a little bit colored by coming back to this just completely foreign world of not being in the classroom with my kids.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Sarah. Some awesome insights there on what you've been working on and what it meant to you. So let's turn it over to Frank. I think you're still on.
Yeah, I'm still here. So as the other scientists said before, so it was great to have a PolarTREC teacher on the team. I think they're bringing a whole different perspective there. They're getting all this, they're interacting with the schools. They're bringing, like, at least on the ship, like, questions from the students, and then they're asking everybody, making everybody thinking about, like, what we're doing, how we better explain our work to other people. And as I said, we haven't been interacting much since we got here basically into the lockdown phase into New York. And our labs and everything is still closed. But hopefully if things are opening up in the fall, there might be opportunities to do more interaction with school groups. Looking forward. And yeah, so having Sara on the ship was great. She really helped out a lot in all kinds of different groups that were operating. She worked with a lot with the sediment people, which were the most need for extra labor work, but also help with the mapping of the floor and with the oceanographers. So it was really good. And I think, so I think it's always a good experience.
All right, thank you also, Frank. Okay, so I think that was it for everybody's presentation. I know researcher Craig Tweedy, you joined at some point here. Is there anything in closing you would like to add to this conversation before I go on to reminders and such?
Yeah, hi Janet. Sorry I was late. I get sort of death by Zoom these days, so I was a bit consumed this morning. But I guess we were lucky enough to work with Monica Nunez last summer, and had an absolutely fantastic time. I thought Monica did a wonderful job at sort of juggling her time and sort of brain capacity amongst many different projects, and she really immersed herself in everything that she did, and it was an absolute pleasure to work with. We also had a really great time, I think back in late February, early March, about a week before we went on lockdown anyway, where Monica and a few of the other PolarTREC teachers came and joined us at our International Tundra Experiment meeting, which was really fun. So yeah, so hopefully as we adapt to the new normal, we can figure out how to revisit some of those wonderful ideas that we had, and really hope we can continue to work with Monica and PolarTREC in general as we move forward. So thanks for all you do for PolarTREC at ARCUS. Absolutely fantastic program, and as a researcher, we were able to leverage all of what you do in just so many different ways. So we absolutely thoroughly support all that you're doing. So thanks very much once again, and apologies for being a little late joining you today.
No worries. Thank you, Craig. So I know there's some other people, there's some partner teachers. Graham, you were on an expedition. If any of you would like to jump in or say anything, you're welcome to at this point, and then I'll go into my reminders. So Elaine's also on there. So anybody that wants to say anything or add? Okay. All right, so just the last little bit, oops, I just went blank on my slide there. So just a reminder that, and I think everybody was at different stages when they were doing their presentations about various products. So I know Judy has already sent out emails to some of you about this, but please make sure if you're an educator in the program to kind of finish up those program requirements. In my world, and I'm sure the researchers can understand this, I'm doing my annual report for this particular cohort. So any and all data is appreciated. And to NSF, so I can do that. And then the other reminder, and it's kind of, we're in limbo because of COVID, but you should all be aware that ARCUS is not supporting any travel. Normally we support travel after the expedition to meet with researchers, to go to those conferences that everybody was talking about, and kind of do the, you know, the post-expedition outreach activities that some of you were alluding to. So ARCUS though has a current policy in place for no travel. No, and that means ARCUS staff as well as any of our programs that we support until the end of this year. So that does impact you if you thought you might be going someplace in the fall. Now, of course, things may change, but at the current policy goes to the end of 2020. So if you were thinking that you want to do something and things look better in your particular state, or you just and you want to go to your researcher's state or vice versa, let us know and we'll see if we can get a waiver or an exception to that. But currently at the moment, there's no travel until the end of 2020. So that also means for some of you that are involved in the AGU meeting, which I don't know how many researchers online currently go to that, but it is a big scientific meeting that a lot of researchers in particular will present at. And in the past, we've supported both students and teachers to and educators to go to that meeting. And this year it's in San Francisco. They are currently deciding how much of it's going to be online and in person, and kind of going back and forth on that as well. But ARCUS as an organization will most likely not be there in person. We will probably have some virtual situations. So, yeah, and I also want to give a big shout out to all the partner educators that are on here today that kind of supported this group throughout their process. Some of them were even involved in the selection process and also might have been joined us at orientation way back when. So we couldn't do this without our alumni, and we really appreciate all of your efforts and your joining us and helping us make this a success. Finally, the one, just a little thing is that if you've been trying to frantically as an educator get on and log on to the PolarTREC website and your username and so forth isn't working, it's because the email that you logged on got changed. So it's no longer a PolarTREC email, it's whatever Judy had for you. And so if you have questions about that or if you have issues, of course, let us know. But I think most everybody's figured it out by now. And that's it. Jen, is there anything you want to add, or Judy, or?
No, I guess it's great to see everyone's faces again, and I'll miss seeing you in the future, but I hope everyone don't become a stranger, and stay in touch and let us know what your newest adventures are once you're back, hopefully safely, and have a great summer.
Yeah, definitely. Enjoy not being online if you are able, limiting your Zoom calls over the course of the summer, and definitely keep us posted on how, especially educators, how it transitions into your next school year or into your change. I know several of you changing work and schools, and life is throwing you, got lots of things going on in the background. So, and in fact, Amanda wasn't joining us today because she is also expecting a baby. So we have a couple of PolarTREC babies out there. It's exciting. Anything else? Anybody? If not, we'll say goodbye, and it was great seeing you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye, everybody.